So just to jump right into it, yes, Missouri is water rich, and there's a lot of evidence that you can just straight see. And then there's also some data that we'll go over that really support this idea that there's a significant abundance of water in Missouri. I'd like for you to stick around to the end of the video where I'm going to share with you horror stories of growing up in California with primitive water systems during a 30-year drought living with hippies. Moving to southern Missouri is the best thing I've ever done for my family. So yeah, the confluence of those things literally lead to some of the worst standards of life. And at the end of the video, I'm going to share with you some horrific stories of my childhood. I think probably the most basic, but also most significant portions of data to look at in terms of water systems is rainfall. And there's a huge difference amongst the state of Missouri. So if you look at northern Missouri, there's about 30 inches average annual precipitation, but southern Missouri gets about 50. And in a really water-rich year, southern Missouri is gonna get like 100 inches or more. So just right there, you can see a big difference between the northern counties and the southern counties of Missouri. And I want to put it into perspective. So a lot of people talk about like Seattle, Washington as being just so rainy and people are depressed because the sun's not out, and you just hear about it a lot, I feel like. And Seattle is only getting about 39 inches on average. So that's actually kind of piddly compared to southern Missouri. So that kind of puts into perspective just how much rainfall southern Missouri gets. Another element in our water system here in Missouri that is special is the abundance of aquifers. And what makes them even more special too is that, most in general aquifers are bodies of rock and sediment that water can move through and collect. But here in Missouri, we have something incredibly special, which is an entire, numerous cave systems and sinkholes and caverns and all of these underground, systems that also hold water. And that actually is very, very rare. I didn't know about how amazing the cave systems were here until after I moved here, but it's mind-blowing. And they also play into the type of aquifers and the size of aquifers that we have here. So when I say an abundance of aquifers, I mean that in any given area, you usually will have multiple aquifers that are providing water. And that also is pretty special. So in southern Missouri, people talk a lot about the Ozark aquifer system, and that's actually comprised of the Potosi, the Gasconade, and Roubidoux aquifers. And the Potosi is massive. Like that's going to be feeding Springfield, Branson, and then probably some of the outlier areas around those cities. And we're talking like on average that aquifer is producing wells at like 800 gallons per minute, but up to 2,000. So massive upwelling of water. And when that's tapped into, it's very, very fruitful. Now, the Roubidoux is not as productive, but I think that there is some evidence that supports that the Roubidoux is more pristine. So Roubidoux on average is like 60 to 200 gallons per minute. And that actually, the Roubidoux does actually take up a larger space. So that can be found in southern Missouri, northern Arkansas, and I believe there's some fingers of it that go into Oklahoma. So you can't really talk about aquifers without talking about springs. And I just feel like if I was going to describe what a spring is, I think of it as, obviously like an upwelling of an aquifer. I think of it as a pressurized and full aquifer that then naturally just upwells from the earth. And please leave a comment below if you have more information on this or better terminology. I am clearly not a hydrogeologist, or I don't even know what field this is that I'm talking about. So, if you have more information, put it below. But that I think of springs as kind of just this natural upwelling from the aquifers. And so in Missouri, we have roughly 4,000 maybe 4,500 springs. Really, people talk about 2,000 because 2,000 of those are like significant, of notable size. But there's so many springs, and often when we show properties, properties will have sometimes multiple springs on one piece. So in Missouri, I do feel like there is the overwhelming majority of like the biggest and the best springs are in southern Missouri. And I mean, obviously I love southern Missouri. I'm not trying to be like biased here, but southern Missouri is the best. So we're going to talk about some of them, and this isn't in order of like their productivity, but just kind of a list of springs that are super significant and have something special about them. So the biggest spring in Missouri, which yes, is in southern Missouri, is called Big Spring, which, it's a fitting name, but it is a whopper. It is, I think, 286, roughly 300 million gallons per day is produced from this spring, and it flows into the Current River, which is an absolutely gorgeous river. If you have not checked out that area, you need to. Epic fishing, epic everything up there, and just absolutely gorgeous. And so Big Spring is number one in productivity. So another notable spring in southern Missouri is found in Shannon County, and that is Blue Spring. And Blue Spring is known for being one of the deepest in the entire country. So Blue Spring is over 300 feet deep. And to put it into perspective, you could fully submerge the Statue of Liberty into Blue Spring. That's how deep it is. Shannon County just keeps having so many big springs. Another one I want to talk about is Alley Spring near Eminence in Shannon County, and that one feeds into Jack's Fork River, and it is world-renowned fishing there. So just so you know that area is designated trophy smallmouth bass fishing, and it's just absolutely gorgeous too. I mean, the river systems in Shannon County and these springs that feed into them are just all time. So another great spring is Hodgson Spring, but people usually just call it Hodgson's Mill. And that's how a lot of these springs are. Most of them are historic mill sites because obviously, people used the mills for so many different things. It wasn't just for like cutting lumber or, all of the other things, or milling flour. It was like each one would have 10 different roles, But that one is a really productive spring, really beautiful, clear, clean water, but kind of on the smaller sides in terms of southern Missouri, which, we got big springs, but that one is in like the mid 20s, like 29 million a day. So the next one I want to talk about is in Camden County, and that's Tonka Spring. I am going to do an entire video on Tonka because it's absolutely incredible. I mean, in one location, right? We're talking a castle, we're talking trail systems, we're talking Lake of the Ozarks, we're talking a massive spring. I mean, there is so much. And then you end it all with like, some nice kayaking on the lake. It's such a good time up there. It's kind of our favorite Lake of the Ozarks little staycation that we do. But yeah, Tonka is no laughing size for this spring. It's 48 million gallons per day. So there is another whopper in Oregon County, and Oregon County has a bunch of whoppers, but the one that I want to talk about is Greer Spring, and that one is almost as productive as Big Spring, which is the biggest in the state. So Greer Spring is 222 million gallons a day that is coming out of that one. So Greer Spring feeds into 11 Point River, and that's in the Mark Twain National Forest, and that area is absolutely epic. But yeah, Oregon County has an abundance of springs, but that one is definitely the biggest in that county. There's one more cool one that I want to mention in Oregon County, and that is Falling Spring. And what makes that one so cool is the spring actually upwells and then turns into a waterfall, and it's super beautiful. And for the last one that I'm going to mention, there's obviously like thousands more I could talk about, but we're going to go back to Shannon County because Shannon County has a lot of them, but Welch Spring is pretty big too. That one is 78 million gallons per day. So you can see how all of these springs upwelling, a lot of them are flowing into the rivers, the creeks, and the lakes, and it's just helping to complete this picture of a beautifully water-rich state. So we still have so many things that we have to talk about in terms of water. In terms of rivers and creeks, there are thousands of miles of them. And growing up in California, some of the biggest rivers were smaller than some of the creeks around here. And actually, I was trying to figure that out. I had to Google it. So a river is designated if it has 3 or more tributaries that flow into it, and a creek just doesn't. So size isn't necessarily part of that designation, but usually rivers are bigger, but some of the creeks here are bigger than rivers that I grew up on. So in southern Missouri, rivers aren't seen as the lifeblood of civilization as much as they are in northern Missouri. So cities like St. Louis, Kansas City, and probably a whole lot of other ones all heavily depend on the Missouri River for everything. Where down here in southern Missouri, in terms of the lifeblood, so much of it is groundwater. So the Missouri River is pretty special though. So it starts all the way up in Montana, which blew my mind. I didn't know that. Starts all the way up in Montana. And then by the time that it comes to St. Louis, that's where there's a convergence between the Missouri River and the Mississippi River. And at that point, it becomes the 4th largest river system in the world. So pretty significant. And of course, it's, it's big enough where it's barges, it's used for, everything. Everyone's drinking water. It is definitely the support system of northern Missouri. So it's also super important to talk about the lakes. In fact, a lot of people who don't even live in Missouri but come to vacation here, that's what is drawing them here, is we have so many lakes. The truth is there are huge lakes all over the state of Missouri, but my favorite ones, of course, are in southern Missouri. We've got Lake of the Ozarks, Bull Shoals, Table Rock Lake. Over to the west, there's Stockton Lake. Norfolk Lake to the east. And all of those lakes have their own kind of vibe and use. Just to kind of describe it, Bull Shoals and Table Rock, it's much more kind of traditional kind of urban lake life. You're gonna see all the pontoons and kind of people they might not even be fishing. They're just hanging out on the lake. So you see all of that kind of lake life more in those lakes. And Norfolk Lake is pretty awesome. It is really clean, beautiful, huge lake, spreads on down to Arkansas as well. And that's you're gonna see grandpa on a skiff fishing. It's just a different vibe, right? But I love them all. Honestly, I love them all, but all for different reasons. One thing that I wanna mention is moving here from California, I actually was really afraid about moving away from the ocean. I've always grown up near the coast and lived on the coast and loved that. I miss walks on the beach, I do. But I have to say, I've never lived around so many big lakes, and it really does scratch that itch. I just didn't even realize that would actually kind of take that role. I just need to live near big bodies of water, and it doesn't have to be the ocean. So the lakes actually do satisfy that for me. So you made it to the end of the video, and I promised that I would tell you some horror stories from growing up in California during a 30-year drought with hippies. And those stories are pretty horrific. First of all, hippies, you gotta love them, but I grew up with hand-dug wells, homemade spring boxes. Jimmy rig systems, piece of plastic, some baling wire, and that's all you need. But, they're not consistent and they're not dependable. And so growing up, our amount of water that we had just fluctuated so greatly. So I'm actually still embarrassed to talk about this, but growing up, we had to share bath water. I have never observed this anywhere else in the world, and from just the most remote villages in South and Central America where, I've had a dirt floor down there and all sorts of stuff, but I've never seen any culture that had to share bath water. And it really was just my parents' lack of being solution oriented or like clinging to like serious scarcity mindset. I don't even know. But the way it was in my house, like if it was low water, there would be a bath drawn at 5 a.m. and first one down got the bath. So you better believe as a little kid, I would jump and run out of bed 5 a.m. to hope to get that first bath. And if you wanted to sleep in, you got a bath after like 3 people would bathe in it. It's so wrong. I can't believe that any parents would ever accept like such a low standard and quality of life for their children, but that's very much how it was growing up in my household. And I'm literally still traumatized by it. Yeah, and I have to admit there is some like really just like it's living in Missouri is healing still these like, crazy past wounds where I love the amount of water that we can use here. Like we get our own bath and oh man, tough times. Growing up with hippies, I will kind of like sprinkle some of these, hippie childhood stories, but they're mostly brutal. So if I ever seem like a bigot, like a hippie bigot, like, I'm coming from some hard stuff. So, there's a reason for it. Now, some urban hippies, which we call yuppies, who are like the bourgeoisie hippies, like they don't get this because like they always had nice stuff and they just, threw up a peace sign. But I'm talking like back to the landers, like stoned out hippies. Totally different scene. So obviously, like I was really concerned with having enough water in California, and I didn't want to live like the way that I had been raised. And so one of the first things I did on a 20-acre piece that I had bought was try to dig a well because I wanted water. I also had 40,000 gallons of water storage. I mean, I was like I was a little bit obsessed because I just I was traumatized obviously. So I hired like the best of the best well drilling company, and they came out and we dug $20,000 worth of dry holes. So I have some clients who ask me, kind of, I don't know, maybe they have had similar stories in other states, but they're very concerned when they move here, like how do they know that they're going to drill a productive well, and just concern about that. And I have been asking, I ask well drillers, I ask homesteaders and ranchers, I ask pretty much everyone I can think of if they know anyone that's dug a dry well. And so far the answer is no. So I will, people usually consider 400 feet somewhat of a deep well, but I've been hearing about wells that are in the 700 feet range, and that's like super deep. So people having to dig deep to hit water does happen, but more on occasion. Most of the time, like you could just throw a rock and drill a hole and you're gonna hit water. And that's because of all these amazing aquifers. But in California, I literally, I think it was 6 holes. They gave us a discount. It was $5,000 per hole. I think we dug 6 holes that day, so they gave me a little bit of a discount. They gave me $10,000 off and just did like a package deal, but I straight paid that well driller $20,000 that day, and we did not hit water. And that was the beginning of me just kind of being done. That was one of the many things where I was just like, a lady can't survive here. Like this is just, it's not for me. So if you are thinking about moving to Missouri, but you've been just kind of wondering about the water scene here, and if you want to buy raw land and there's not a well, like how hard is that going to be? I hope that this video kind of helps you to see how truly water rich Missouri is, and how, if you worried about water in a previous state that you lived, it's not really going to be one of your concerns here. Now, I do want to say that we have been in a drought cycle. The way that people in rural southern Missouri kind of talk about drought years is in cuts of hay. Like how many cuts of hay did you get? And I would say like 2.5 years ago, something like that, it was 3 cuts of hay. So it was a better water year, still a drought year, but better water. And then the following year was like noticeably worse. And that was a single cut that year, only 1 cut of hay. And the grass was also brown for months that year. And then this year, I would say it's somewhere in the middle. People got 2 cuts of hay, but it wasn't totally simple. And some farmers did only take 1 cut and then they left a bulk for their winter grazing. Most people did get 2 cuts of hay though. But yeah, so it does vary. I mean, most of the time, people talk about just 3 cuts being a good year. So I don't know. Put down a comment below if you've heard of a 4-cut year in Missouri or another state. Maybe that's the pinnacle. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you want more info on living in southern Missouri. As always, my information is in the description. Call, text, email, or set up a Zoom if you're planning to make a move to the Ozarks. Thank you and see you next time.